Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the No Hair All Heart podcast. I'm your host with no hair, Mookie Spitz, and I've got the legendary acoustic finger picking goat, Mr. Pat Donohue, and he's got more hair than I do, so he's already at a distinct advantage here. How are you, Pat? Thanks for making time for us.
All right. Well, I must admit that in that sense, I've never been referred to as a goat before. In other ways, I have, but I'm not the goat by any means. Either way.
Okay, by GOAT, we're meaning greatest of all time,
Yes,
and
I really
uh,
can't claim that.
you
Really
can't
can't.
claim that. Well, I'll throw you in there. You're good buddies with Chet Atkins, or you were. You
We
guys
were,
played
yeah.
together. You did
Uh-huh.
an homage for him, and he did one for you. And people put you in the same group of guitar players as Leo Kottke and Tommy Emmanuel,
Well, that's
and
really something.
and we
Yeah.
feel blessed for having you.
Thank you.
And I had Peppino D'Agostino on the podcast fairly
Pepino,
recently.
yes. Haven't seen him for a long time. I always loved hanging around with Pepino.
Peppino is a great storyteller, and Lawrence Juber told me that Peppino is also a great cook.
Yes, that's what
So,
I've heard. I've never experienced that personally, but I wouldn't doubt
so,
it.
so I had Lawrence on too. Peppino suggested I have Lawrence on, and then I had Lawrence, and we had a wonderful conversation, and we talked a little bit about you. So I thought I'd give you a ring and see if you could join. And here we are. And I've got a bunch of things to ask you, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers would love to hear directly from you.
I'll do what I can for sure.
All right. So I guess we could just take it back. You're a Minnesota kid,
Yeah, in
St. Paul.
St. Paul, Minnesota, which is where I am right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Chicago native, so we used to always freeze our ass off every summer. And our only recourse was to know that you in Minnesota had it probably worse than we did. It's
Oh, in the winter.
cold.
In the winter, you mean, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
It does get cold up here.
cold, cold. I've been up there. It's nice. And
It
I
was a
think it
long winter.
became kind of known with the movie Fargo, making a little fun of the accents.
Oh yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background. Were your parents natives? You just grew up there?
Yes, I'm just from St. Paul, Irish kid, and went to school here and discovered music at a fairly early age, and kind of followed that. Ended up following that route, but I didn't really set out to become a musician. Um, but it's a long story. Like I said, I grew up here, and my older sister had a a Goya guitar. It's a real folk guitar back in the early '60s, like a Joan Baez kind of a thing. And so I was forbidden to touch it when she, by her. Her little brother didn't, and I don't blame her. But when she was out of the house, that's the first thing I did. And so I kind of learned secretly for a while on her guitar. But then I found another old instrument and just kept plunking away at it. And at the time, I was also a drummer in a rock band. Um, but more and more, I just like playing guitar, and eventually just switched over entirely.
So your sister wouldn't let you play guitar, and that of course made you want to play guitar even more.
I suppose it did, yeah, at some level. But I just thought, well, I could do that if I had a chance. So I kept at it. Then, when I was later on in my teens, I got interested in blues guitar playing, and especially that of early blues masters from the 20s and 30s. And that fit in more with the acoustic sort of thing that I was going for at the time. And um, that just kind of took over my playing for a while. And that's how I learned to play. But then I, slowly musically expanded to not just blues, but applying those things to all kinds of different styles of American music that I wanted to play.
How did you approach it? Obviously, there's a natural proclivity, and every guitar player is different in terms of picking up the instrument and starting to master it. Were you mostly by ear, listening, playing
Yeah,
along?
almost totally.
Yeah.
Almost strictly by ear, but to this day, I'm not a very good reader. I can do it with a gun in my head. But I don't relate to music like that naturally at all. But always by ear. And over the years, I learned, a certain amount out of books. I have to admit, I learned a lot out of the back of Guitar Player magazine. I just would find something that I didn't know and just grab onto it the best I could. So a lot of it came from that. I did not have videos and things like that are so easily accessible now. Not to sound like an old crotchety fool, but that's the way we learned back in those days from records.
Yeah, it was old school. You lift the needle up and then you put it back, listen to the measure to the song again, lift the needle up, put it back. That was all we had. That's how I learned too back in the day. There was no YouTube videos, no instructional videos. Did you have someone who inspired you, who taught you, or are you an autodidact for the most part?
I learned from everybody, really, whoever I could learn something from. I had some friends that I played with around town here, and they taught me a certain amount of things, and I picked it up off the streets, really. I did take 3 guitar lessons when I was in Denver back in the 70s from a guy named Dale Bruning, a jazz guitar player and instructor, and he was quite the jazz guitar guru, and that was what I was aiming for at the time. But he was way above me, and yet the things that he showed me, I learned over the next 15 years or so, to where now I know what he was talking about. So there is that, but mostly it's been by ear and by playing with other musicians. And I used to go to concerts of guitar players that I really liked and get there early enough to sit in the front row and do this, and I go home and then I just work on the stuff that I saw, which helped with what I was working on from hearing it on the records.
That's another aspect too. Back in the old school way of doing stuff, you would see people. Even Eddie Van Halen talks about going to the Hollywood Bowl and seeing Jimmy Page do the Heartbreaker, and then
Yeah,
figuring that he could tap it instead of just hold it. And I remember seeing shows too, wondering like how the hell they do it. Because again, we didn't have access to YouTube videos, on-demand content, and the only time we really saw our favorite musicians play might be a documentary on television, but that's as good as it got, and we actually got to see them play.
yeah. There's
Were
something
you
about live that communicates
the
in an
energy?
urgent urgency, right?
The urgency, and I remember going to my early shows too, and just the one, it was almost like a religious experience to actually see the band live that was just living on the vinyl. You felt the energy, the lived experience of actually playing in front of people, and then being on the receiving end of all that sound, and then the audience itself, like this hive consciousness tapping into the groove. It's
I think
really
that's really what
transformative.
it's all about when it comes right down to it, is that kind of
Mm.
communication. It
Right.
can be simulated or reproduced, but when it's actually happening, that's not really describable. It just
Yeah.
is.
And that's all we had too back in the day, which made it even more urgent and profound and fun. Were you mostly an acoustic player from the roots, or did you veer into electric, especially when you're playing in bands and you're hanging out?
Oh, I hear it all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I have several electric guitars, and I do play electric on occasion, but I've always been more of an acoustic player. And it's really a good question, because to me they're very different instruments, and the things that you have to do to make them sound good are very different. And so I'm pretty good at the acoustic part, and the electric I don't know, I can't convince myself that I'm an electric guitar player. So.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Especially when you're younger, you want more bang for the buck, so to speak. And there's a natural draw to especially testosterone-laced adolescents to make some noise and
Well,
and to
right,
really
which
and to
I have
really
plenty
jam.
of it. I have plenty of that, but I expressed it acoustically, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And you're in that group of acoustic masters too, like we mentioned, and all of them just love the immediacy of the instrument, and maybe that lack of extra firepower heightens the sensitivity and the connection with the instrument, and even the percussive aspects that
I
all you
mean,
guys embody too.
fingerstyle versus pick style, or acoustic versus electric.
I was just going acoustic versus electric in general, but then you're bringing up now finger versus picking too, which is yet another dimension of that.
Yeah, guitar's a fascinating instrument, I think, in a lot of ways. But yeah, there are several ways to approach it, and then a couple of different instruments traditionally to play it on.
Yeah.
And the percussive aspect, I think, is common to either one.
Yeah.
The feel on the electric is so much different from that on acoustic that I'm always, seems to me, I'm always overplaying on the electric, even if I got the same gauge strings on there. Just because, I don't know, everything is really amplified and every little thing that's out of tune is really out of tune. And maybe I'm just hearing that where I don't on acoustic.
And even the lighter touch, especially when you have heavy duty amplification. I mean, the even the shredders like Ingwe Malmsteen, he uses the 1 millimeter pick and he barely touches the strings. You hear this wall of sound and a tsunami of notes, but it's a very, very light touch. And with acoustic, you need to work at it a little bit, right?
Yes.
You're digging in there, you're connecting with it, and you're responsible for all the output.
Well, that's right. And that's probably why my tone on electric is, I'm not that satisfied with it because my technique is really basically geared towards acoustic. And
Yeah,
but sometimes you get lucky and that crossover helps and you come up with something that hasn't been come up with. So
it could be neat. Yeah. Another aspect is it frees up multiple fingers. So you've got Knopfler from Dire Straits who used the finger picking approach to electric, and he cut his swath that way, kind of unique and fresh. But you're especially well known for your thumb riding the bass, and you've got a dimensionality to your playing which would be impossible, I think, if you picked acoustic, let alone you're playing the electric.
well, I don't know. There's probably nothing that I do on acoustic that you couldn't do on electric, but it would just sound different because it was conceived and learned on the acoustic. But Mark Knopfler is another Chet head, I call him. Chet Atkins, influenced by Chet quite a bit, and so I don't know. There's something in that lineage of fingerstyle guitar that goes back to Merle Travis and even further before that, American finger picking, basically. That people like Mark Knopfler have going for them and made them, I think, distinct from other rock guitar players.
Absolutely, especially when you're picking, and this is what I was hinting at, that if you're picking, you're really thinking very linearly and one note at a time. And even if you're blazing through arpeggios, it's still very linear. You're getting one note at a shot. And finger picking opens up to chordal kind of trajectories, right? And the
Yeah,
way you arrange in particular, you're taking advantage of that. You've
I
got
think
all
it's
the
easy.
layers and the arrangements that goes on. I mean, that's what I particularly love about your stuff too, that there's a lot coming out of the guitar.
Yeah, well, I tried to, but that's one of the difference between fingerstyle and pick style is you can play a little bit more orchestrally with
Yeah.
fingerstyle and pick the notes that you want easily because you can pick them with your fingers. Where if you did the same thing with a pick, you'd have to come up with a technique that just allowed the notes that you want to have play, and people do that, but it's more
Yeah.
natural on fingerstyle to play very deliberate harmonies and things like that.
Yeah, some of the newer players are actually adapting finger style to electric. Like the up and coming guy who's really making a name for himself, Mancuso. He's all over the place,
Oh,
and he's
yeah.
he's quite impressive. And he uses the three
Play
fingers.
mostly these two fingers, but I bet
Yeah,
if you
two
had
or three.
Mateo do it with your pinky, he'd go like this, and it sounds just as good. I mean, the guy was
Probably, but he's got the three finger,
yeah.
1 2 3, 1 2 3.
I
Yeah,
I
going,
never
yeah.
heard anybody that's smooth with that technique before in any genre.
Yeah, he's super fun to watch, and I'm sure that he was influenced by guys like you and the picking acoustic guitar guys.
Well, I don't know
I
how much.
put money on that he's listened to some of your 20 records today.
Well, I don't know if he heard any of that along the line that inspired him to play the way he does. I'm gratified, but yeah, he's terrific.
Yeah, so there's fun hybrids that are coming out, but But again, you embody that, old school approach, which is so anchored in the Delta blues, like you're mentioning. You forayed into jazz.
Yeah.
You've got so many different styles across your different albums, and most people probably know you from your Prairie Home Companion days when you were pretty much the house band
Yeah.
on the radio.
Yeah, I was one
You
of
and you and Garrison were fist pumping. Can you tell us a little bit how did that happen?
them. Well, we still fist bump every now and then, but let's see, how did that happen? Well, I don't know. The history of the show goes from about 1974 to 2014, something like that. And I wasn't involved with the first iteration of it very much, although I was an occasional guest back in the 80s during that time. But then Garrison quit the show for a few years and he went to Denmark and eventually worked his way back. In about 1993, he started the show back up again from the Fitzgerald Theater in St. Paul. And he, I think, was looking for musicians around here he had worked before with successfully. And one day I just got a call and he said, "You want to do a few shows this season?" And I said, "Sure." And 20 years later, I did that, ended up doing that and being part of the Guys All Star Shoe Band for about 20 years, which was,
Yeah, very fun, amazing, and again, bigger exposure for you and
oh yeah,
for your music.
very much so. If anybody knows of me, it's probably because of that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of,
But for those who know and those who do follow finger picking acoustic, again, you're in the Mount Olympus of these few guys,
well, it's nice of
and
you to say. Thank you.
yeah, but it's true, and it's delightful having you. Can you share with us a little bit about your trajectory? I mean, you've got so many albums and you've covered so many genres, and I'm assuming some of it might even be circumstantial, just like hooking up with Garrison and doing that. But
Uh-huh.
if you're looking back at your career playing, are there common themes or threads? How do you look at decades of jamming in retrospect? How does it make you feel? And does it make sense to you? Is it something that you kind of were driving toward, or it just kind of played itself out?
Do I have any deep life regrets? Is that what you're
Well, I'm kind of hitting at the opposite, which is looking back at, this or that
Well,
being
I,
great.
I've
But
been I've been very, very, very fortunate to be able to, mostly make my living as a musician and in a nice way. So I feel very lucky about that. I'm very thankful about the fact that I can still play, and I will continue to do so as long as I can because I love doing it. And I think that, certainly one of the biggest things that happened in my musical career was getting hooked up with a national radio show like A Prairie Home Companion. Not only because of the exposure, but it was kind of a living, breathing thing where every week, I had to have something, and it had to be something different and something that fit, was appropriate, should we say, to the show or whatever occasion, whatever town we were in. So it really helped me develop, as an artist also to just have to do that every week. And so I wrote a lot of songs for that occasion or that show, and I still play a lot of them today. They turned out to be good songs. And I don't know if I would
yeah,
have written them if I hadn't had to, you know?
yeah, deadlines are a creator's best friend, actually. You got a goal, you can't mess around too much. You need the output. And then you breadcrumb yourself. You can see where you were, and then, you can go do some new stuff in that model.
Yeah.
So it's very productive for musicians to have that kind of schedule, especially if you just like noodling around. I'm assuming that you play guitar a lot, even
Well,
these
fortunate I
days, or you
do.
kind of live with the instrument.
I certainly have a lot of times in my life, more than now. But even now, I managed to get a few hours in of playing a day
Yeah.
because still remains my favorite activity. So I still play as much as I can, and like I said, I'm glad to still be able to do it. But I don't think I could put in 6 and 8 hour days the way I used to. I'd get physical problems.
Oh, sure. It's a drag getting old, just like Mick Jagger saying, for all of us. And it is cool to your point that you're still rocking it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that aspect of it. In regard to what you had asked earlier, like some pivotal gigs and points in my lifetime, I'd say that the time that I spent touring on my own as a Pat Donohue, the solo act, and I did a lot of stuff in various pockets of the United States and did a lot of touring. And I never got that fame and name recognition that allowed me to be more successful at it than it was worth. Because it's a lot of trouble and a lot of risk and um, can be a lot of pain also, but it can be very rewarding. And so just the experience of having done that for, I don't know, a long time really probably formed my presence on stage and my repertoire to some degree. Because I try and find things that I like and that the people I'm playing for like. And the Venn diagram is, sometimes about like this. But I definitely want to play things that people like to hear more and more and more. I keep thinking, that's the trick. You play songs that people want to hear, not the ones you think they should want to hear. That's the key to success there. But there is a crossover, and there's enough good music to do both. So that helped form my particular musical style. And the last thing I'd say is that in the last 5 years or so, I've had a weekly gig here in St. Paul, Minnesota, called Pat Donohue and Friends at a place called the Midway Saloon. And every Wednesday night from 6 to 8, I get two or three of my musical buddies, and I've got a lot of really talented musical friends around town, and we get together and play fairly casually and spontaneously for a couple hours every week. And it's been going on for about 4 years, 5 years now. And it's kind of taken on a life of its own in a certain way. People seem to have accepted it and are coming to see it. And it's always something for me to look forward to, playing the same and yet different every week. And so I'm really happy with how that's going along too, knocking on wood.
Yeah,
So those are
to
some.
your point, that's what it's all about, really.
I
Just
really feel
playing
like
for
there's a
people and
connection.
connecting.
Yeah,
It's interesting that you bring up this apparent tension between what you like to play and prefer playing and what audiences would be eager to hear from you.
uh-huh.
Because listening to your stuff, especially looking at all your albums and your output for years, I don't feel that tension. You've got such a broad range of content, but I never felt as though you're out there the way some musicians can be, like atonal, super chromatic, or experimental, or going off the conventional deep end. I always found your music very accessible,
Well,
very melodic,
that's
and
what I like
and
to hear.
and popular. That's just my take on it. What kind of content would you have liked to have done if you really had your way of it? If you could snap your fingers and audiences would appear that perfectly matched what you wanted to play, how different would it have been? Or what stuff would you have done or could you have done that would be more fun for you or more up your alley?
I don't know. I feel like there's a slight misunderstanding, but maybe I can figure it out. I never did any recordings that I didn't want to do.
No, no, I don't mean it that way, but just
Just what I was referring
this
to.
sense of trying to appease the audience. I found all your stuff very accessible and popular.
Yeah, well, I'm not meaning to be unpopular. I was always kind of
Yeah.
hoping it'd be more popular than it is. But as far as just the style of music it is, what I was referring to before was the fact that I've spent an inordinate number of hours perfecting certain instrumentals or songs that I really thought were just great, and then I'd finally get them to where I could perform them, and people just didn't respond to them.
I
And
see what you mean. Right.
you can go down that road a lot, but if you start to pay attention to what the things that they do respond to, and they're usually fairly universal type musical things, I think that you can communicate a little bit better. There's a lot less self-involvement needed.
I see what you're saying. So, I mean, this is prevalent for every musician too. Like, people will be pumped to go see a stadium rock act, and in their mind, they've got two or three hits that they want to hear. And even ostensibly you're a fan, you're not going to be familiar with 90% of the content of a band, even a popular band. And you kind of sit around and you go for a beer and come back without thinking twice. And then you're just hoping that at least for the encore they play your favorite song. So I think that's probably an endemic challenge for all artists. I'm a writer too, and I know that sometimes I'll put something out that I just think is the best ever, no one cares. And
Yeah,
then I'll offhandedly just shoot through something and throw it out there and there's a reaction. So it
does it
could
make
it
you
could
wonder?
it could be frustrating, right?
Doesn't it
Yeah.
make you wonder why people reacted the way they did to that particular thing that you didn't think was that important?
Yes,
That
yes.
seems worth examining.
Yeah, and I think there's random elements too, like memes on the internet. Why the hell does this thing have 10 billion views and something that's arguably much more innovative or interesting falls flat?
I don't know. I don't even pretend to know
Nobody
what's going
does, I don't think. Hollywood has this problem. What's a hit and what isn't?
Yeah,
And like William Goldman said, nobody knows nothing. And I think same rules apply to music.
it
So
is that way.
yeah, I think your frustration is pretty much universal. And looking back, what can you do? You did make the one point about having to hustle and bust ass.
Hmm.
And if you innately love to do what you do and just do it, then you're putting most of your time and energy into the actual joy of content creation. And there's a sincerity that's there too, which is, I think this is awesome. It's coming from my heart. Here, world, give it a listen. But then you have no control over it. They'll take it or leave it. And in order to convince them that it's good, that's a completely different aspect of being an artist. All of a sudden you're a business person or a marketer,
I
which
think
is
so.
which is not you, which is
No,
not you, right?
some people it is. They're very good at marketing themselves,
At
but
both.
not
Some
very
can do
many.
both.
Not
Yeah.
very many. And I'm certainly not one of them. So I'm kind of a take it or leave it sort of a performer.
Right,
This is
right.
what I do. I sure hope you like it. Otherwise, what can I say?
Yeah. Well, bless you for it because there's an integrity to it. And to your point, you've had a lot of satisfaction just and success doing what you like to do.
Yes, that's true. An immense amount of satisfaction and a certain amount of success. And
Yes, absolutely.
I always try to learn what it is. When I see people react to whatever it is, it makes me perk up and think, well, what is that? How can I exploit that? Whatever it is, it's part
Right.
of the communication.
Yeah. And is it completely random or is there something in the song itself that hits home some kind of universal trigger to get people? I mean, there are hits, right?
Sometimes it's
In
random. Most are
retrospect, you
hits.
look at a hit and you're like, of course that's a hit because everyone likes it, but a cat chases its tail. Everyone likes it because it's a hit, and it's a hit because everyone likes it.
Yeah, right. It is.
How the hell do you know?
How do you know, and how do you recreate that it happen again?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe the best thing to just ignore the past and go on and
And do your thing. Yeah.
live your life. Yeah.
Do your thing. What kind of advice would you give younger guitar players, especially like younger ones who really are going back to the foundations? Not the Instagram jockeys who are just out there for clicks and playing whatever at 90 miles an hour. But there's a young generation, and I see a lot of them getting to the down home Delta blues. They're playing Robert Johnson.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
They're singing like Son House. They mean it. They feel it, and they're doing it. There's a tradition there. You embody a lot of that in your own playing. Can you give them any encouragement or advice for mastering the craft and going out there and trying to hustle it into something that could even be a career?
Well, Musically, I might be able to give some direction and advice, but as far as uh, taking on music as a career, I didn't know when I was doing it how you do it, and I don't know now how you do it. I know that I tried awfully hard, mostly at playing as well as I could, and also trying to be a professional when I did play gigs, and I expanded my gigsmanship to not only be able to play coffee houses, but I could play strolling dinner music, and I could play at all the standards and improvise with people by ear, all this by ear. So I think that all kind of snowballed into whatever I've got going right now.
How did you pick it up? I mean, can you it likely came naturally to you, especially since you're not looking at the sheet music. It's not map versus territory, it's territory for you. You're listening, you're playing along, you're playing with people, you're playing with bands. It's kind of what you did. But if you could slice it and dice it in a way that you could advise a younger guitar player in terms of best practices, some of the cool stuff. I'm sure a lot of people listening and watching are learning, see you as a kind of idol and want to play what you can play.
First, you have to get out more, kids.
Yeah.
If that's the
Yeah,
case.
yeah,
But
yeah. And don't worry about your career. Just play the damn thing.
I don't know. There's on one hand, there's so many more uh, resources for learning music very easily available than there were, as we talked about before. And yet, there's a disconnect. It seems like because I'm hearing people that are playing once in a while. I hear a younger person who play a country blues song pretty well, and I said, "How'd you learn that?" Well, just off the YouTube. And somebody had taught them that who had learned it off something who had somebody somewhere along the line learned it off of listening to Blind Blake or somebody like that. But I think there's a disconnect because people don't necessarily go back and listen to those influences because there's no video of them. You have to actually listen and see what they were doing. But that does give you an insight into the actual feel that goes with that style of music, not just the notes that are played. And so I would say listen, listen, listen is probably my most important thing that I could tell an aspiring musician. Listen and try and feel something and understand how music works.
It sounds to me like you're recommending go to the source.
Yes,
So you're hinting that there's copies of copies of copies.
no,
It's like a Xerox copy that gets duller and duller the more
yeah,
time
well,
as
it's different.
you
You
put
can't
it
say that it's
through.
worse or better, but it kind of loses the plot, if you will, because there's
Right.
such things that blues players were doing that if you do the same things without having listening to that, it's hard enough when you do listen to try and relate to it. But I think when you learn it off of YouTube, you don't even know what you're shooting for in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah. Jack White comes to mind, White Stripes fame, because he liked to get down and dirty. He treated guitar like a block of wood with six strings on it, and then his wife Meg, pots and pans drumming, no bass player, and just kind of shouting into that mic. And he spawned from some of this DNA of the Delta blues and all that, and he tries to embody that transmission of that raw emotional energy, not filtered through Instagram and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that he
And
does.
and I think he's turned a lot of younger players onto his source material, where it comes from.
That's a real
And
benefit.
yeah, and it's an attitude that you share, which is go to the source. And the source is also a lived experience of figuring out why you're playing in the first place. It's no accident that the blues is called the blues. It's your landlord evicted you, your girlfriend left you, and life sucks. So you look at music as a catharsis and a release, and in that release is where the passion and the energy comes from.
Well, a lot
Take
of
away that passion and energy, then what's the point? You're just on Instagram.
yeah, yeah. There's less and less humanity. It seems like involved with music these days, and so I think the more we can play live and have access to real music is the better.
And what do you think of I mean, the music scene now is weird. You've got AI bands that are streaming on Spotify, and the kids are mixing. The computer is now their instrument rather than an actual instrument.
That's
DJs have
true.
reached the point where the remix is more famous and more listened to than the actual content that's being mixed. To the point where the DJs are considered the artists. They don't even know who wrote the song or composed it. It's irrelevant.
And that just strikes me as so incredibly bizarre at this point in the game. I'm not denying that's true.
Yeah. And then the genres. There's no, you've got the originals, right? The Delta blues rock. You have the improvisational offshoot into jazz. Yeah, influence of reggae and Caribbean stuff. And then we went into our rock evolution, new wave, industrial, then EDM and dance. And it's been growing. I kind of feel like everyone's almost exhausted themselves and they just keep combining and recombining things in odd mixtures. Ska, punk, bluegrass. That's a new band. But
No,
there's
true.
nothing really original. And it just seems to be reconstituted like the AI songs that now people are listening to.
That's
What do you think's an antidote to that? Because you've been pure in the sense of drawing from an established tradition, mastering the craft, putting your own signature style and voice to it. And
that's
that's
well.
like almost a lost tradition.
I don't know. Maybe. I know several younger musicians who are really true musicians that don't have a bad attitude at all. So I don't know if we're losing music or anything like that, because I know too many young people that are on it. But I will say that it's increasingly rare. It seems like that an instrument is being played as opposed to an electronic device. And so I could see it being that there's really not very many of certain type of instrumentalists left.
Yeah, and then what's lost is the humanity behind it, right? The
Yes,
story.
that's distressing to me because there's a certain beauty in the way a saxophone vibrates or a trumpet or a guitar. That's a physical thing and not a reproduction of a physical thing.
Yeah. And especially finger picking acoustic guitar. So we go
Especially
full
that,
circle
yes.
that way, right? That's like about as physical as it gets. They say that anyone can play the piano instantly. So, a 5-year-old can go up to a piano, it's percussive, and then you start hitting on it. If you happen to hit the right keys, you might hit CGE and you got a chord. But guitar is hard.
Oh,
You gotta build the strength in your fingers. Even getting a coherent D chord, let alone a C, can
that's right.
take
That's
people
right.
weeks, months to build up everything from the finger strength to the calluses, coordinating right hand and left. And then even if you're bold enough to go multiple fingers, then you got to really rewire your brain.
Which strings am I picking with which finger? And
Right.
plus, I've got all this to maintain. But that's true. When you're starting it hurts. After you've played guitar for about an hour and you haven't played a lot, or even 15 minutes, your fingertips start to get red and even blistered at times. But I guess that's every instrument has its pain factor, and you have to decide whether you want to play the instrument bad enough to withstand the pain. But if you do, then you get calluses, and then you can actually play quite a bit longer. So it's a progressive process. At first, it's painful, but on the other hand, guitar is one of the easiest instruments to play a mute sound like music on. Like if you do play a D chord, you can go playing, and it almost sounds like music. Whereas a violin, you're struggling just to
Oh no, that's even rough.
to
That's
make it
like
sound. Yeah.
cats screwing in an alley for 2 years. You can't even get a coherent coherent sound on it, and there's no chords too. You're just like
Yes,
you're
I know. That's a rough instrument. I think clarinet is a little like that too. It's hard to get just a decent sound out of it.
right. So maybe guitar's kind of in between, banging on a piano and trying to squeeze something that isn't piercing out of a violin.
No, but it's one reason the guitar is kind of abused
Yes.
little as an instrument because if you can play three chords, you can kind of make a career if you want. So people don't necessarily have to be that good of an instrumentalist to get by with guitar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was talking to the unique aspects of guitar dynamics with Lawrence Schuber and with Peppino D'Agostino when I had them on, and they've got very different views of the same essence. So Peppino plays a lot of chromatic stuff, and he does a lot of interesting percussive, and Lawrence is more refined in the sense where he's playing more in that box, but very polished and arranged. And he both of them use alternate tunings. Like Lawrence is big on the Dad Gad. He's got a whole album and he plays a lot in that. He plays in G and C. Have you experimented in terms of some of those tweaked tunings and going chromatic and getting a little weird?
I can go chromatic. I like that a lot. But as far as tunings, I play a bit in drop D.
Yeah, yeah, that's a rock thing too. People love drop D, and for
Yes,
listeners, it's just a whole step down. Usually, E is the low note on a six string, and when you
right.
do a drop D,
One
it's like
step to D.
that one string goes down a whole step to D, right?
Otherwise, you play everything the same except for
Everything the same, right, right.
And I'm a big fan of playing in that tuning in a different key from D. Like play a song in G using a drop D tuning. There's all kinds of little cool
Of
things there.
course. Yeah.
But otherwise, I've dabbled a little in open G and open D, which are the blues tunings, if you would.
Yeah.
Mostly for playing bottleneck style
And
guitar.
then you could slide because
Uh,
it's a one finger major chord.
yeah.
You just kind of zoom it around. That's Keith Richards has made a career out of that.
Yeah. Well, that's true. If you have a guitar that's tuned to a chord. Now, my problem was with the Prairie Home is that it was a very live experience, and I didn't have the opportunity to tune my guitar to an open chord, and I couldn't bring an extra guitar just for that. So I
Yeah.
learned to play the slide that I play on standard tuning,
Yeah.
and it's almost as effective if you were
Yeah, it's
really good at
cool.
damping. You have to be really good at damping with both of
Yeah.
your.
No, no, I bet you no one noticed.
Well, I tried to make it. Nobody noticed. I tried to make it nobody notice.
That's great. And I have to ask you, just being in Minnesota, and this is just a podcast about music, but politics and music have been interwoven since the beginning. And now there's been a lot of controversy in Minnesota, and blues rock have had statements, and that energy flows into it. And I'm just curious how the political landscape, the cultural landscape has influenced some of your playing and some of the energy that's gone into music. On the flip side, you have a good sense of humor. Like one of your very popular songs is, learning how to play guitar, which is very, very
Learning to play
funny.
guitar, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I've got to tell you, very, very little,
Okay, that's interesting. Right.
very little, if at all, and it's a bit by design because I think that one of the stronger things about my particular presentation of music, at least live, is the fact that it's an opportunity to not really think about that stuff for a little while.
Great,
So
great.
just for me, and I've heard tell from
Yeah.
people that have come that they value that quite a bit. And all I can say is that as a personal, just a guy who would go to any other concert, if that performer goes into a political diatribe of any kind, I'm really apt to not be interested. And so I don't really try to present that in my shows or in my playing at all. I don't know how you would represent it in your guitar playing, but um, I really try to stay apolitical as possible. I have my own beliefs, as does everyone. So,
Yeah, that's refreshing to hear because everyone from Roger Waters, now Bruce Springsteen,
yeah,
and on the other side of the political aisle too, you have performers who have to integrate their ideology, especially into live performance. So you find yourself as a participant just having to listen to a political diatribe rather than just experience the joy of music, which by its nature frees you, liberates you, makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Last thing you want is to be reminded of things that are uncomfortable or
Well,
contentious.
personally, that's true. I think there are a lot of people who do see a big connection between the art that they experience and their politics.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess that's not my.
That's not your cup of tea. And I think that's why I asked because it's you've been kind of neutral about it. And this, I think, goes back to your core playing, like to the foundations of blues and jazz and just being the master arranger and craftsman and songwriter in a way where you're not pulling in this extraneous stuff. You're focused on the music itself. And I
No,
think that's refreshing to a lot of
I'm
people.
interested in doing that.
Yeah, I think that's really refreshing to folks.
And I think it's great that the people are doing it, and they're certainly entitled
Entitled
to do
as
whatever they want to
they
do, but
want,
they're
right,
entitled to not do it in the same way.
right. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and it's been great catching up with you. We have folks listening and watching who are your fans
Well,
and
thank
would
you.
love to
You are. I
see
appreciate it.
love to see more of you. Anything you want to say in terms of being able to talk to some of your fans and say, hey, this is a candid moment.
Well, I don't know. I guess I would.
Maybe
I had something to
maybe
say
the
to them. I
hey,
might.
you picked up on my hint. Maybe you could play a ditty for them.
Maybe I'll just make something up, and
Yeah.
try not to make it too long here. But
Oh, go for it.
if I was going to sit down and play guitar right now, which I guess I am, I
All
might do
right.
something like this. Yeah, that's what I had to say.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for taking me up on the hint and playing us a little song. That's terrific. And can you remind us where you're playing in Minnesota with your little
Yes,
band?
all
Where
kinds
where's
of
that?
all kinds of little gigs here and there, but there's one pretty constant one, and I'll tell you about that, which is Wednesday evenings from 6 to 8 in St. Paul, Minnesota, at a place called the Midway Saloon. It's called Pat Donohue and Friends. We have a good time. We have a good
All
time.
right. And they can go to your website too. You got gigs that are coming and going. You got your little
PatDonohue.com.
itinerary there. Can you tell us about being on the road?
Well, I'm say that I'm not doing it very much anymore, being on the road. I did that for, like I said, a lot of years, and now the thought of flying someplace and renting a car and driving around to coffee houses where there might not be very many people there, it doesn't really appeal to me in the way that it once did.
Yeah. Well, good for you. And
Well,
on behest of all your fans and also personally, thanks for just doing what you do all these years and contributing to the genre, to the craft.
I'm glad to
You
hear
had
it.
your own signature guitar too.
Well, yes, this is a Pat Donohue model, Martin.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask about that if that's one of your signatures.
It doesn't come with this
Yeah,
tube.
we couldn't see it with the capo.
Yeah, that's the PD model.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Cool. So thanks so much, Pat, again for making time.
All right, thank you very much.
Follow him if you're in Minnesota. Go check him out.
That sounds great, Mookie.